Most people assume they understand what happens when they die. A moment of light, maybe, a reunion, some kind of judgment, a passage into whatever they've been told comes next. That's the version every major institution has handed you, across cultures, across centuries. The idea that death is a threshold you cross once, and whatever is on the other side receives you. But there is another account, an older one that was systematically erased, not because it was primitive or confused, but because it was specific, mechanically specific. It described not a peaceful passage, but a structured process, a recycling system, a loop that most souls enter without ever understanding they're in it. And it named the architects of that loop. It called them the Archons. The Gnostic texts, the ones buried at Nag Hammadi, the ones that survived book burnings and institutional purges, don't describe the afterlife as a reward waiting for you. They describe it as a trap, not a metaphorical trap, a cosmological one with mechanics, with gatekeepers, with a specific weakness that the texts claim can be exploited. This is what they didn't want you to find. This is what got entire communities disbanded and libraries set on fire. So that's what this video is about. The soul recycling system the Archons allegedly operate, how it works, why it works, and what the Gnostic tradition said you could actually do about it. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Library. Let's start with what the Archons actually are, because the surface-level definition is almost always wrong. Most people who've encountered the term file it somewhere between ancient mythology and science fiction. Cosmic bad guys. Interdimensional demons. That's the version that circulates in pop occult spaces, stripped of its real structural significance. The Gnostic texts are more precise than that. In the Apocryphon of John, one of the most complete cosmological documents recovered from Nag Hammadi in 1945, the Archons are described not as evil in the cartoonish sense, but as incomplete. They are the creations of the Demiurge, the false craftsman god who built the material world without full access to divine light. The Archons inherit that incompleteness. They rule the planetary spheres, 7 of them, stacked like concentric shells around the Earth, and they govern through ignorance, not malice. They don't know what they're missing. That's what makes them dangerous. Ignorance administering a system it believes is correct is far more effective than deliberate cruelty. Here's where it gets cosmically significant. According to the Apocryphon of John, when a soul departs the physical body, it doesn't simply drift upward into light. It encounters these spheres. Each one is administered by a specific Archon. Each Archon demands something, a toll of sorts, though the texts frame it differently. What they actually extract is the soul's energy, its divine light, piece by piece, as it ascends. By the time the soul has passed through all 7 spheres, it has been so thoroughly stripped of its accumulated spiritual awareness that it returns to the material world effectively blank. No memory of previous lives, no memory of its origin in the pleroma, the divine fullness above the Demiurge's creation, no memory of the trap at all, and so it enters a new body. And the cycle begins again. I spent a long time sitting with that framework the first time I encountered it. I remember reading through the Apocryphon of John one evening and coming to the section on the soul's post-mortem journey, and something about the clinical precision of it stopped me cold. It wasn't written like mythology. It was written like a manual, detailed, sequential, structured, and the question that landed on me that night wasn't, is this literally true? It was, what kind of tradition produces this level of specificity, and why was it buried? That question led me down a path I haven't entirely come back from. Now, some viewers will recognize that this isn't entirely unique to Gnosticism. Tibetan Buddhist traditions describe something adjacent in the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, where the soul encounters lights and deceptive figures in the after-death state, and must navigate them consciously or be pulled back into rebirth. The Hermetic traditions speak of the soul's descent through planetary spheres on its way into incarnation, acquiring limiting qualities from each one. But the Gnostic version has something the others often don't, and it's the thing that got it suppressed most aggressively. It names the trap as a trap, not a teaching opportunity, not a purification process. A trap, with architects, with a specific mechanism, and, critically, with a specific countermeasure. Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyon, writing his famous treatise against heresies around 180 CE, was so disturbed by Gnostic teachings on the afterlife that he dedicated substantial sections of that text to refuting them. Which is interesting, isn't it? You don't write extensive refutations of something you believe is obviously foolish. You write refutations of something you believe is persuasive, something you believe might actually convince people. The suppression itself is evidence. That's always worth sitting with. So what exactly is the mechanism? How does the reincarnation trap actually function according to the texts? There are several components, and each one matters. First, the soul's amnesia is not accidental. In the Apocryphon of John, the demiurge and his archons deliberately bind the soul with what the text calls chains of forgetfulness. This is not poetic language for natural memory fade. It is described as an active process, something imposed. The soul arrives in physical incarnation already sealed, already cut off from its own origin, already blind to what it is. Second, the material world itself functions as a distraction mechanism. The texts in the Nag Hammadi library, including the Gospel of Philip, describe the demiurge's creation as a counterfeit fullness, a simulation of genuine divine reality, convincing enough to hold the soul's attention across entire lifetimes. You don't escape a prison you don't know you're in. Third, conventional religion, according to the Gnostic view, does not help. This is the most unsettling part for a lot of people. The demiurge is worshipped across the world's major religious traditions as the supreme god. Petitioning him for salvation, according to Gnostic cosmology, is the equivalent of asking your jailer to let you go. He may offer comfort, he may offer moral structure, but he cannot offer what he does not possess. Genuine divine light, genuine gnosis, genuine exit from the system he administers. Can't exactly put a collection plate in front of someone's internal liberation just saying. One viewer left a comment on my video, "I stopped praying to God, and this is who actually answered that landed exactly on this point." They wrote, "The bit I think is important about this is why would a perfect, all-knowing being who is complete need prayer to him? He would not need his ego to be boosted." That's the question the Gnostics had been asking for 2,000 years. So now the question is, what does the trap actually feel like from the inside? Because if it's working correctly, you wouldn't feel it at all. That's the point. The Gnostic texts describe the soul's condition in the material world using a term that appears across multiple documents: hypnos, sleep, not metaphorical drowsiness, ontological sleep, a state in which the soul is functionally unconscious of its own nature. It moves through life, accumulates experience, forms attachments, follows the laws of the system it believes is real, and eventually dies, at which point the Archons process it and return it, stripped and sealed, to do the whole thing over again. The Trimorphic Protonoia, a text that I personally find to be one of the most extraordinary documents in the entire Nag Hammadi library, frames this from the perspective of the divine light itself, descending in three forms to try to wake the souls trapped below. The divine calls out, "I am the one who dwells in the light. I am the one who alone exists." And the souls, sealed in their forgetfulness, cannot hear it. Not because the signal isn't there, because the receiver has been deliberately disabled. Here's the analogy that finally cracked it open for me. Imagine a radio tower broadcasting on a specific frequency, continuously, without interruption, from the moment you were born to the moment you die. The signal never stops, it never weakens. But the radio you were handed at birth, the one the demiurge built, is tuned to a different band entirely. You hear static, Maybe occasionally, in moments of silence or grief or unexplained wonder, you catch a fragment of the real broadcast. Most people file those moments under coincidence or emotion and move on. The Gnostics said those fragments are not accidents. They are the pleroma bleeding through a damaged seal. Now here's where the Archons method becomes specifically interesting. And by interesting, I mean specifically disturbing. The Pistis Sophia, one of the longer Gnostic texts, likely compiled between the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, contains some of the most detailed descriptions of the afterlife processing system that exist anywhere in ancient literature. In it, Sophia describes how the Archons of each sphere interrogate the ascending soul. They present the soul with a version of itself it recognizes. Its accumulated personality, its memories, its emotional patterns from the life just lived. And the soul, still identified with those patterns, gets pulled back in. Not by force, by attachment. The trap works through the soul's own clinging to what it believes it is. This is the part I personally think is the most devastatingly precise thing in any of these texts. The Archons don't need to drag you back. They just need to show you a mirror. And if you don't know the difference between your divine spark and the personality it temporarily inhabited, you'll reach for the reflection every time. That's not cruelty, that's engineering. Now, and this is critical, the Gnostic tradition did not leave this as a hopeless diagnosis. There is a countermeasure built into the cosmology. It appears across multiple texts, and it always hinges on the same thing: Nosis. Not knowledge in the academic sense, not information you can collect and store. Gnosis as direct, interior recognition of your own nature as a fragment of divine light temporarily housed in a material body built by a lesser god. The distinction matters enormously. You can read every text in the Nag Hammadi library and still not have Gnosis. That's not Gnosis. That's just a library card. Gnosis is the moment the soul recognizes itself. And according to the texts, that recognition is the one thing the Archons cannot process. They can strip memory, they can trigger attachment, but they cannot extract what has already seen through the illusion. A soul that recognizes itself in the moment of death, that knows it is not the accumulated personality, not the memories, not the emotional history, but the divine spark wearing all of it temporarily. That soul, according to the Gnostic framework, cannot be rerouted. It passes through the spheres without being depleted, because it has nothing the Archons can reach. Before I continue, if what we're covering today is the kind of hidden knowledge you want to go deeper on, I want to mention that our free newsletter, Insights Academy, is where we share material that's honestly too specific and too sensitive to cover openly on YouTube. Sign up now, and for a limited time, you'll receive a free ebook copy of The Kabbalion, a text that maps directly onto everything we're discussing here. So the question isn't whether you believe in the Archons as literal entities. The question is whether the framework they represent, a system that profits from your unconsciousness and resets you every time you get close to breaking through, maps onto something you already recognize. Because a lot of you do recognize it. That's not an accident. That's the fragment of the pleroma in you responding to a description of its own situation. So what did the Gnostics actually prescribe? Not as philosophy, as practice. Because the texts don't just diagnose the trap. They describe the exit with a level of specificity that is, frankly, uncomfortable to read in the context of everything that came after. Let's go through what the primary texts say, because this is where most summaries of Gnosticism go wrong. They stop at the cosmology. They give you the demiurge, the archons, the pleroma, and then they move on, leaving the whole framework suspended in abstraction with no practical anchor. That's not what the tradition actually taught. The Apocryphon of John describes something that scholars sometimes translate as the saving formula, a set of declarations the soul must be able to make at each Archon's gate. These are not petitions. They are not prayers. They are identity assertions. The soul approaching each sphere doesn't ask permission to pass. It declares what it is, It says, in effect, I know where I came from. I know what I am. I know what you are. You have no claim on what I carry. That structure, declaration rather than petition, is the exact inversion of conventional religious practice. In the video, I stopped praying to God, and this is who actually answered. I covered the broader theological stakes of that inversion, and if you haven't watched that yet, I'd recommend it because it builds the foundation for what I'm about to say. The short version is this: prayer, in its traditional petitionary form, structurally reinforces the assumption that you are less than what you're petitioning. It encodes separation. The Gnostic declaration encodes something else entirely. It encodes recognition. And recognition, Nosis, is the only currency that matters at the gates the texts describe. Now, the Gospel of Philip adds a layer to this that I find equally compelling. It describes the Archons as capable of interacting with the soul only through the image, the personality structure, the accumulated ego, the body of memories. The text says that those who possess Gnosis are no longer Christians, but Christs, a phrasing that got this gospel buried faster than almost any other document in the tradition. Because what it implies is that the Archons are fishing with specific bait. They can catch ego. They cannot catch the divine spark that has recognized itself. This is where I want to bring in something a viewer wrote on my recent video. I tried Mary Magdalene's monad call. What happened shocked me. The comment read, I revoke all pre-birth contracts and agreements made under amnesia. I am a divine spark of the monad. That got 37 likes, which means a lot of you recognized something in it. And what you recognized is exactly the structure the texts are describing. Not a prayer, an assertion, a declaration made from the position of one who knows. But let me be precise about what the texts are not saying, because this matters. They are not saying that simply repeating the right formula protects you. That's the magical thinking version of this, and it misses the point entirely. The Apocryphon of John is explicit. The Archons can be deceived by the appearance of Gnosis if the soul itself hasn't actually arrived there. Performing liberation is not liberation. Knowing the password without knowing what the password means accomplishes nothing. The texts are consistent on this. What passes through the spheres intact is genuine interior recognition, not recited, not performed, not rehearsed. Actual, lived awakening to one's own divine origin. And this is where the Valentinian school, one of the most sophisticated Gnostic traditions founded by Valentinus in the 2nd century CE, the man who, as I've mentioned in previous videos, came within a single vote of becoming Bishop of Rome, adds something essential. Valentinus and his students described 3 categories of human being: the hylix, dominated by matter; the psychics, capable of moral and religious development but not gnosis; and the pneumatics, those in whom the divine spark is sufficiently awake to break the cycle. The pneumatics were not born that way. At least the later Valentinian tradition moved away from that reading. What made someone pneumatic was not genetics or destiny. It was the activation of what was already there. The divine spark is present in all souls. The texts agree on this universally. What differs is whether it has been recognized, whether it has been woken up. I want to be honest about something here. When I first seriously engaged with the Valentinian system, I'm talking about spending several nights working through Elaine Pagel's research on these texts alongside the primary documents themselves, I hit a wall around the question of fairness. If the divine spark is in everyone, why does Gnosis come to some and not others in a given lifetime? The texts don't give a satisfying answer to that. Some traditions lean toward accumulated readiness across lifetimes. Others speak of the intervention of divine mediators, the Logos, Sophia herself, as the trigger for awakening. What they all agree on is this: once recognition happens, it cannot be undone. The Archons cannot reseal what has genuinely opened. That's not a small claim. That is the central claim of the entire tradition. And it explains more than anything else, why this tradition was the one the institutional church chose to exterminate most thoroughly. Not the traditions that disagreed about doctrine, not the traditions that quarreled about scripture, the tradition that said the soul, once genuinely awake, is beyond the reach of any system, ecclesiastical, cosmic, or otherwise. You cannot control what cannot be reached. You cannot extract tribute from what knows it owes nothing. Now here is where it gets cosmically significant, because once you understand that the soul, once genuinely awake, is beyond the reach of any system, you have to ask the question the Gnostic texts actually answer. What happens to the souls that don't wake up? What happens to the ones who go through life and through death, still operating inside the archonic framework without ever questioning it? The texts have a precise answer. And I want to be clear, this is not metaphor dressed up as cosmology. The Gnostic tradition treated this as a literal description of a literal process. They called it the recycling of souls, the return, the loop. Here is how the Apocryphon of John frames it. When a soul exits the physical body without having achieved Gnosis, without that interior recognition of its divine origin, it does not pass through into the pleroma, the realm of fullness and light from which all souls ultimately emerged. Instead, it gets captured, redirected. The Archons, who govern the planetary spheres between the material world and the pleroma, intercept it. They process it back through the cycle of embodiment. A new body, a new life, another round inside the prison, without any memory of the previous round, without any map for the current one. Amnesia is not a side effect. Amnesia is the design. This is the part that stopped me completely the first time I read it. I had to put the text down. I'm not exaggerating. I spent a long evening with the Apocryphon of John open on my desk, and I got to that passage, the one describing how the Archons return souls to the material world through what the text calls the bond of forgetfulness. And I just sat there. Because the system being described isn't punitive. It isn't evil in a cartoon sense. It's administrative. It's a mechanism. The Demiurge and the Archons aren't torturing souls. They're managing them. Efficiently. Indefinitely. Without malice and without mercy, which is actually more disturbing than either. Think about what that means for a moment. A system of control that operates without hatred, without intent to harm, just the smooth, impersonal cycling of energy through a closed loop, is almost impossible to resist through moral outrage. You can't argue with a machine. You can't appeal to its conscience. You can only find the exit. The Gnostics said the exit exists, but it has to be found from the inside. Now here is the piece that connects everything. The Archons don't just rely on forgetfulness between lives. They rely on it during life. The entire architecture of the material world, its pleasures, its anxieties, its social hierarchies, its religious systems, yes, including those, is structured to keep the divine spark inside a human being from ever recognizing what it is. Distraction is the primary tool, not chains, not cages, noise, the constant ordinary noise of survival, ambition, grief, entertainment, doctrine, and desire. And when something threatens to cut through that noise, when a teaching arises that tells the soul it is not a creature waiting for divine mercy, but a fragment of the divine itself, temporarily misplaced, that is when suppression moves from passive to active. I've covered parts of this in my video, I tried the Demiurge's exit door for 7 days. What happened shocked me. But here, I want to go deeper into the mechanism itself, because understanding the trap is inseparable from understanding the escape. One viewer from that video, someone who left a comment that I've thought about since, wrote, "Organized religion has never been about anything but social control and wealth accumulation." That's blunt. And I personally think that framing, while incomplete at the cosmic level the Gnostics were describing, lands with uncomfortable precision when you apply it historically. When councils were burning libraries and excommunicating scholars, the question worth asking isn't what did they believe? It's what did they fear? The pistis. Sophia adds another layer to this. It describes the soul's journey through what it calls the counterfeit spirit, a kind of false self overlay that the Archons install through the process of embodiment. This counterfeit spirit doesn't just distract the soul, it mimics the soul. It generates desires, impulses, and even what feel like spiritual longings, all of which, because they originate from the archonic layer rather than the divine spark, lead the soul further into entanglement rather than closer to recognition. Which means the very thing you might mistake for spiritual progress could, if you're not precise about its source, be another layer of the loop. That is not a comfortable thought. But the tradition didn't traffic in comfortable thoughts, it trafficked in accurate ones. The question then becomes, if the trap operates on every level, material, psychological, even spiritual, how does the divine spark ever break through? What does genuine recognition actually look like? And is there a practice, not a ritual, not a doctrine, not a moral system, but an actual interior act that initiates the process of seeing through the counterfeit? The tradition says yes, unambiguously. And that answer is where everything in this video has been pointing. So let's talk about the exit, not metaphorically, not poetically. Let's talk about what the Gnostic tradition actually prescribed as the mechanism by which a soul breaks the recycling loop and moves genuinely and irreversibly toward the pleroma. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Library. And if you've stayed this far, I want to give you the part that actually matters. The tradition is unified on one point. The exit is not earned. It is recognized. This is the single most disorienting thing about Gnostic soteriology, the question of how souls are saved, or in Gnostic terms, how they return to the pleroma, because every instinct inherited from conventional religion tells you that liberation is achieved, that it requires effort, purity, obedience, or accumulation of merit. The Gnostic texts cut through that entire framework with a kind of surgical precision. The tripartite tractate found at Nag Hammadi describes three categories of human beings: the hylix, who are entirely absorbed by material existence and cannot perceive the divine spark; the psychics, who have some spiritual capacity but remain bound to the demiurge's system and its moral architecture; and the pneumatics, the spiritual ones, in whom the divine spark is not just present, but active enough to respond to Nosis when it arrives. Note what that means. The pneumatic doesn't achieve liberation through practice. They recognize their nature when the recognition becomes available. The practice, to whatever extent there is one, is not about generating a state. It's about removing the interference that prevents an already existing signal from being received. Here's the analogy that finally cracked it open for me. Imagine a transmission, a signal that has been broadcasting continuously since before you were born. It is not distant. It is not waiting for your moral improvement before it strengthens. It is present, constant, and clear. The problem is not the signal. The problem is the static, the counterfeit spirit, the noise of ordinary existence, the archonic interference that the Pistis Sophia describes with such uncomfortable precision. Practice, in the Gnostic sense, is not generating the light. It is clearing the obstruction. I spent several weeks working through the practical sections of the Gospel of Philip after my video on the monad call, the one titled, "I Tried Mary Magdalene's Monad Call, What Happened Shocked Me," generated a comment from a viewer that I keep returning to. They wrote, "I revoke all pre-birth contracts and agreements made under amnesia. I am a divine spark of the monad." That comment has 37 likes. What I found striking wasn't the ritual framing, it was the structural move. The revocation of pre-birth contracts is precisely what the Gnostic tradition describes as the initial act of recognition. Not a petition, not a prayer for permission. A declaration of what is already true. a refusal to keep consenting to the terms of a system you never actually agreed to. That's the interior act. Not obedience, not supplication, recognition followed by refusal. The Gospel of Philip says it this way: "Ignorance is the mother of all evil. Ignorance will result in death. Those who come from ignorance neither were, nor are, nor shall be." The soul trapped in the recycling loop is not being punished by the Archons. It is being sustained by its own unawareness. The moment genuine Gnosis enters, the mechanism loses its grip. Not because the Archons become kind, because the soul is no longer legible to the system that was processing it. This is what I want you to sit with before we close. The Reincarnation Trap, as the Gnostics understood it, is not a punishment, and it is not a design flaw. It is a consequence of amnesia. And amnesia, unlike malice, can be dissolved by something as structurally simple as remembering. Not remembering past lives. Not remembering facts about ancient cosmology. Remembering what you are beneath the counterfeit spirit, beneath the archonic overlay, beneath the noise. The tradition doesn't promise this is easy. It promises it is possible, and it insists across every text, every community, every variation of the teaching, that once it happens, it holds. The recognition that dissolves the trap cannot be resealed by the trap. The soul that has genuinely seen through the mechanism does not forget between incarnations in the same way, because the divine spark has reoriented. It is no longer pointing outward, waiting for external validation from a system designed to keep it waiting. It is pointing inward, and what it finds there is not a personal self, but the monad itself looking back. Stop waiting for permission from a system that profits from your waiting. Start recognizing what was never actually hidden from you, only obscured. You were not placed here to cycle indefinitely through the administration of the Archons. You were placed here, or rather, you placed yourself here, as a fragment of the pleroma temporarily inside a material shell, capable at any moment of remembering the full weight of what that means. That is the teaching. That is what they burned the libraries to suppress. That is what Irenaeus wrote 4 volumes against. That is what one vote in Rome might have made the official theology of Western civilization, and didn't. And that is what's still here, waiting. Not in a distant text, not in a hidden ritual, but in the part of you that has been quietly unsettled this entire video, wondering whether you already knew. If this video resonated with you, let me know by commenting, "I understood it."